So as I sit here, it is getting near the end of the month of June. And the month of June is the month of Pride, as I'm sure we all at this point have come to realize. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Pride and its counterpart, which is shame. A lot of things can tangent off of this, so I hope I can get my thoughts out, that they don't sound, that I don't get lost in uh, too much information, I guess, to the point where I don't give it much information at all. Let me start this off by talking about something that took place. Uh, me and me and my wife went to a city not far from where we are just to take a weekend away, and it's in Florida, and that's important to the story. Coming out of the bed and breakfast we were staying at, there was a couple exchanged glances with the guy, cordial, sort of exchange. And next thing I know, we're in this really interesting conversation. That weekend was, now that the guy that I was speaking with was black. That weekend was a weekend like that, where I talked to people and had good conversations seemingly everywhere we went. And so when we this conversation in particular that I just mentioned was when we were coming out of where we were staying. We went around a little bit, got something to eat, came back. Beside the place where we were staying was a bar. The bar had a stage, outdoor stage, where a band was playing. The band was all black, the crowd majoritively white, everybody having a good time. I focus on the race aspect of this because, and the fact that this is in Florida, because the NAACP had just issued a travel warning to black people. And I want to juxtapose reality in which we actually live and what we are treated to, spoon fed, and given by the media, social media, mainstream media, old school media, however you want to phrase it. Have you noticed this difference? That there's a disconnect. Have you noticed, like, just generally speaking, so when you're online, there's a way people behave that I would say is not good. People aren't as cordial. People say things to you I think they probably wouldn't say to your face. I try to not do that when I'm online, and but I see that most people, I don't know if maybe is it most people? I don't even know. But the social media situation is a situation in which I would say it's fake reality. It is not, people, you think about, how people get catfished. There's, you know, you're always putting some sort of, there's people that put pictures that, they're not really them. People will post pictures of themselves at their best, not at their worst, right? I mean, and that's not to say that that's disingenuous or anything negative, but it lends itself to fakeness, right? I mean, it just does. And I want to talk about this concept about reality and imagery and optics. So social media and old school media is optics. That's the world that they live in. One of the things that I've noticed is, and maybe I've said this before in previous videos, I'm probably sure that I have, that you can sort of take those who control the elites and sort of understand the truth by what they say, by taking what they say and inverting it. Because what they do is invert the truth. Is everything they say inverted? Probably not. Because I think in order to provide somebody with a lie, you have to set up the lie with truth. So there has to be some sort of connection to reality. But when you understand this pattern, that there are things that are said that not only are not true, but they're 180 degrees opposite of true. And this to me has been helpful because it means I can sort of see the truth even in what they say, even though their mission, their goal is to deny me that truth. So, pride is really shame. If you take this, and also let me say this before I get too deep into this. This is not meant to be any kind of bashing of for anyone who has alternative lifestyles, okay? I For whatever it's worth, you can set aside the concept of born this way and just say, look, if somebody, just the fact that we're arguing this, I grant the point that somebody who says I'm born this way or was born this way, what they're basically saying is they don't remember any other way. As young as they can remember, they've been, let's say, the opposite sex attracted, right? So I'm not condemning somebody individually. What I really want to focus on, for me, my point in regards to the individual, that's between them and God. But in regards to society at large, what I want to talk about is in regards to this idea of a movement. Like, we are in a month where we're told it's a Pride Month. That's not individual. That's a group think. That is a message. That is a narrative that's being set there. And when you look at what's going on, is it prideful? Is it something that's worthy of pride? If you think pride is a good thing, and I think it can be a good thing. I think pride can be good, and pride can be bad. I think shame, its counterpart, can be good, and I think it can be bad. I think if you look at what's going on, there's a lot of, I would say, things that people should be shameful of, and yet it's in your face. And I think that's on purpose, because there's something internal that's broke. If somebody is prideful naturally, or let's just say stable, they're confident, they don't go around looking for affirmation. They don't need it. This whole thing about constantly berating and let's face it, this is another thing that needs to be said. It used to be that the left said that they didn't like the religious right because they didn't want to be preached to. Well, the tables have turned, and it's now the left that is preaching. They're in the streets. They're the ones telling you what's righteous and what's not. And if you don't agree with them, you're the immoral one. And it's okay to at least say that there's immorality. At least there's that. The argument should be that, what is moral? But I want to focus on this concept of 180 degrees out of phase. So when they say pride, they mean shame. Because it's over. It's just overly, it's almost this concept, I think you've heard it said, methinks he protests too much. So there's something there where it's this awkward over exaggeration. Oh, we're prideful, pride, 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 pride. You celebrate us. It's no longer tolerance, it's celebration. It's no longer being out of the closet. It's now that I'm out of the closet, you get in the closet, Christian, or you dance in my parade. You know, being free means being free. Everybody has to be free. If you believe in diversity, then you have to tolerate those who have opinions diverse from you. Maybe they don't want to celebrate sodomy or just whatever they consider to be lewd behavior. I think that's fair in a free country. This is why, and it's important to talk about this 180-degree stuff, because these are the people who couch themselves as liberals, but they're actually not liberals. They're the opposite of liberal. They are the ones that actually want a larger government. That's not liberalism. That's not what John Locke believed in. And so you see this flip. You can almost take what they say and flip it upside down and know what it means. So if they say they're progressive, they're regressive. If they're liberal, then they're communists, basically. They want to go, they don't want people, they're not for the individual. That's liberty. You can't be for the individual if you're demanding conformity, that everybody is of the same, right? You also can't be somebody who cares about diversity at that point. It's always about the poison pill, because that's how you lie, right? It's the bait and switch. If you're doing a trick, if you're lying, if you're giving a Faustian deal, you don't say the negative. You candy coat the negative in something positive that somebody will be attracted to. That's what I'm suggesting. So this concept of pride, right? Let's say Leah Thomas, the swimmer. Is that something worthy of celebrating? Is that something that is worthy of pride? I think of myself. If I have, not being pretending to be a woman in a pool, but the concept of, imagine that being my son. Would I clap that my son's finally won a swim meet? That he had to get into a pool with girls and pretend to be a girl? Even if he believes it doesn't even matter. I'm asking, is it a source of pride? Is it a source of pride that my son exposes himself to the girls in the locker room? Because that seems like, that used to be a thing that perverts did, right? They'd expose themselves. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. But now we stand up and clap. Oh, brave and beautiful. And you see how things have gotten so twisted. And you can't deny what's going on, and it's this idea of 180 degrees. So one of the things that comes to mind, and I've said this before, just to get a little bit off the pride thing and get it, but still in the politics, is that I remember when they kept saying Trump colluded with Russia. And I remember thinking, well, that must mean they're colluding with Russia. And it turns out I was right to a certain extent. They were actually colluding with Ukraine. And Ukraine is basically Russia to a certain extent. I mean, the Russian people, essentially started in Kiev. So you see that that game, right? You and this is something that I have done a video on. I think it was called scapegoating. It's this idea that you project onto your adversary what you're guilty of. That way all the shame goes to them. And so, and you see where shame comes. See, shame's still involved here. They can attempt to stomp it out, but anytime you're running around proclaiming and demanding that external affirmation, that tells me that internally there's something wrong. You don't have internal affirmation, so you need everybody to tell you, to convince you what you're doing is right. That's what I see that's going on. And we live in a nation of this. A bunch of people who are just going along with the flow because that's what the narrative is. They just do what they're told. They believe what they're told to believe. Why do people do this? Well, they don't think for themselves, for one. It's groupthink. They believe everybody's thinking this way. Why? Because the media says that everybody believes this way. And then when they go out and they get slapped in the face by reality, they don't think to change their mind and go, maybe the reality that I thought was reality because I watched TV that told me what reality was is not reality, and the reality that is actually outside my house is reality. They flip everything on us in that world. It's like Stranger Things. It's like the upside down. When we watch our TV and our smartphone or our computer, we're actually entering the upside down. They're twisting everything upside down, right? They did this with 2019. They quarantined the healthy instead of the sick. You don't quarantine the healthy, you quarantine the sick, but they changed it. They flipped it upside down. You put a mask over your face when you don't want to spread germs, not when you're trying to keep from getting germs. That's not how masks work. It's not how they've ever worked. And you can see this pattern. I mean, there's so many things, You think about the health czars that are, I think there's a meme out there where the health czars are out where all of them look unhealthy. The argument between, if you have been paying attention, where Robert Kennedy was on Joe Rogan, and some guy said he shouldn't have had him on there, and Rogan said he'd pay him $100,000 to debate the guy. Well, the establishment guy won't debate him because he doesn't want the narrative busted, because he's on the side of the people that control the media. It isn't his ideas and his facts that can stand up. It's the narrative that continues to be pushed that is the power, not the truth of it, because there's no truth there. And you kind of see, once you start seeing this, and back to the pride thing. So let's just talk about, why is it this way? Is it just happenstance? This is something that's really important to understand. Everything isn't happenstance. We also live in a world in which we are very inundated by atheistic philosophy. This idea that everything is derived from chaos. There's no order to the world. It's just the appearance of order. You can't have this infect you, because then everything, it's just the new thing, and it's just random. But what if everything's not random? What if there is no new thing under the sun? So I want to get into that. This is where I go biblical. You have been warned. So let's get into some Bible verses here. So the fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, pride and arrogance, and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. So the fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, pride and arrogance, and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. You see the dichotomy that's set there. Pride is on the side of evil and against the Lord. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Let me ask a question. Do you think our nation is headed for prosperity, or is it headed towards destruction if you have to lean one direction or another? Is this a sign of the destruction? But he gives more grace. Therefore, it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Do the people who call themselves prideful, are they acting in humility? Of course they are not. Of course they're not. Everyone who is arrogant in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Be assured he will not go unpunished. I want to discuss, so that was truth. And I just need to say, even if you don't, if you're not inclined to believe the Bible, what do you see? Does the atheist world, well, it's just, whatever, it's just happening. Does that make more sense than, no, the pattern? Did you recognize the pattern that was there? It is either there or it is not. Talk about patterns. Let's talk about history. The month of June. See, we celebrate Pride because of an event that took place in New York. The Stonewall event. I don't remember what it's called, but it took place at a bar called the Stonewall. The event celebrated is basically an attack on cops, for whatever that's worth. I mean, if that's a great event to begin celebrating, then form your own opinion. But that is where the Pride sort of situation began to manifest itself. Pride Day, Pride Week, next thing you know, it's a month. All about alternative sexual people attacking cops, trying to kill cops, basically trying to burn them in a bar is what essentially took place. Now we say that and we go, oh, it just happened to be in the month of June when this took place. Well, the month of June also just happens to be the month of Tammuz. The month of Tammuz is named after a god, Tammuz, who was cut into a bunch of pieces, and his lover, which is very important in the story, by the way, goes by many different names. Tammuz probably does too. I'm just not as familiar with his names, but have you ever heard of Isis, Asherah? I think Athena is also synonymous. Ashtaroth, Inanna, Ishtar, all mean this same goddess. Now, this goddess, I'll call Asherah, and Tammuz were lovers. Tammuz was killed by demons, I think, in the mythology, cut into tons of pieces and scattered around the world, and she went through great lengths to gather all the pieces back to resurrect him, except for one piece she couldn't get back, which was his penis. The month that he comes alive in is the month of June. Now, based on the moon calendar, but it relatively lines up in our calendar to June. Asherah might sound familiar if people who have read their Bible, because this was a cult religion in ancient times, obviously, in the Bible. It's mentioned in the Bible. They would erect things called Asherah poles. These Asherah poles were basically giant phalluses. Old world religion is bartering with the gods. It's witchcraft. This is something that maybe people don't understand. This is why idolatry is bad. This is why the Bible talks about idolatry. Because all these gods that exist, lower G gods, these demons, these entities that empower the spirits in the world in which we live, will be willing to make deals, Faustian deals, right? You give me something, I'll give you something. It's a bartering system. When the gods, Tammuz, maybe Baal might be the corollary for Tammuz, and Asherah come together and have intercourse, the land becomes fertile. Well, if they keep doing that, you got fertile land. But you got to entice the gods to do it, though, you see. This is what was going on. This is why there's temple prostitution. It's basically like, I assume, pornography for the gods. You set up temple prostitutes. This is why people sacrifice their children, because of the fact that the fertility of the sex of humans gives you a child. Well, the fertility of the gods in their intercourse gives you fertile land. So you exchange your child for fertile land. I mean, after all, the child is just another mouth to feed. And it's a, it's noble if you think about it. You're killing a child and you're feeding everybody. I mean, this is the way that they thought about it. And I'm convinced that this is where Easter comes from. Kind of like Ishtar. Sounds like Ishtar. I know people say that this isn't true. I don't know. But it seems really weird that we're dealing with rabbits that are extremely fertile. What do rabbits have to do with the resurrection of Jesus? Dipping eggs in eggs or fertility. My understanding is they used to dip them in red coloring, which represented blood. Do your own research. Do your own research on everything I'm saying, by the way. Don't take my word for it. You go do your own research on this stuff. One of the oldest communities or civilizations was Sumer. This is probably, if you go in most history books, the oldest. Here's something that you need to know. They celebrated this month back then, and it was a celebration of confusion of gender. It was parades in the street. It was men acting like women, women acting like men, and it was all sexually driven. You see how there is no new thing under the sun? We're doing exactly what these old pagan customs have done. We have, as Americans, as whatever you want to call us, we have turned our back on God. We have said, we are no longer a Christian nation. And now old gods have returned. And we are now worshiping them, let's say, in carnal, crazy ways. That is what's going on. When people say, the world is a world of chaos and nothing matters, with 180 degrees. The world has order and patterns, and everything matters.